Yay!
Yay!
So, Bonnie, for the ones that don't know you, you're a screenwriter, you're a film director,
Yes.
and you're a novelist.
Now, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot to talk about today. I'd like to ask you, how did it start for you? How did you get into screenwriting, film directing? I
Oof,
suppose that novel writing was after, wasn't it, or was it before?
absolutely. No, it was definitely after. So I actually, I started making movies when I was like a little kid. One of those people, I used to steal my parents' video camera kind of thing. And then whenever I went into high school, I moved to Stuttgart, Germany. And my teacher in Germany was just fantastic. He used to write for all the grants and stuff. So we had all kinds of video production equipment in school. And I didn't know that that was even like a real thing. For some reason, film feels so far away unless you're in the world. So growing up in the military world, like that seemed like something for somebody else. And then whenever he introduced me to all this equipment, I became an addict, pretty much. He made me a key actually for the editing bay, and I like lived there. That was like my entire, school was I lived in the editing bay. I was that nerd. But I started doing interviews with rock bands, big metal bands that were coming through Germany. And because I spoke English, it gave me a leg up. So they let me go to like Papa Roach and Rock am Ring and like all the big tours that were coming through, Disturbed, Judas Priest, Ozzy Osbourne, all these amazing people and I'm a huge metalhead. So I was just in heaven. I was like, like all my favorite bands. And so after that, it felt a lot more realistic to pursue film. And I won the European Film Festival, the Student European Film Festival, whenever I was 17. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just move to Hollywood and all the doors will open because I have these. No, everyone in Hollywood had an award. So I worked, like everybody here is like, oh yeah, hey, get in line.
You trip over people that I don't know words. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And like bigger, and I was like, oh, right. I thought there was going to be a red carpet and a big bag of money waiting for me. What happened? So I knocked on doors for a month straight because I didn't really know anybody in the industry. But I got a copy of Variety magazine, and they always have the films that are in production listed in Variety. And so I started calling the ones that I wanted to work with, like people that I'd, looked up to as like filmmakers, etc. And I got a job on a production as a PA. And I worked my way up literally for 10 years. And I started, like, I've been writing since I was a kid. I was published the first time when I was in 5th grade, but just like little stuff, not really anything that was like of note. But as I saw film differently, working in crew, I started realizing that screenwriting is so much more than writing a story. It's writing a very complex set of instructions for many very creative, artistic people. And so that ignited me, the idea of being able to share a vision with other artists and like all of us pull together to make this one common idea. And yeah, I mean, it drove me to continue on working through all the craziness. I mean, especially crew.
I want
12-hour
to
days.
ask you actually, would you say that for the screenwriters that are watching us today, would you say that directing is definitely a plus when you want to be a screenwriter, just to try to direct once or twice at least?
Absolutely. That is such a great point. That is such a great point. I almost feel like it's almost impossible to write a screenplay unless you've at least been in Video Village. If you've directed something, even if it's just something small that you've written, that it levels people up so hard, so fast. And it's almost like the secret, right? If you can do it, then you can do it. And if you can't get on set, you'll never get on set, kind of a thing. So yeah, that's a great point.
I wanted to ask you that because I think I've directed films before,
I know.
I don't think I would repeat the experience.
Really? Yeah, you just didn't love it.
It's just one of those things. I really like the conception of everything, and I like the final touch, which is the editing. I love that.
Oh,
But
I love
in
that.
between, it's the dealing with people on set that I
I
find
don't blame you.
I don't I find very difficult, because everybody's on another wavelength, and you have to explain what is your wavelength for the film. And
Yes.
because I'm highly sensitive, I think you need to be really strong to do something like that. So I decided to do the final touch, the first touch and the final touch, but not the in between. So I admire you so much, because we're going to talk about your film now, Savage Lands. I know it's not the only one. We're
Right.
going to talk. I know you've got some films in festivals, running for festivals right now.
Yes. Yes,
And,
that's right.
I'm very excited about that, because I can't wait to see them. But the one that is available for us to see, Bonnie, would you mind if we can show some extracts to our viewers today?
Absolutely. Please,
Okay,
yeah, go
let's
for
do
it.
Let's watch it.
Do you have any regrets?
Sergeant Williams, on behalf of a grateful nation, I'd like to award you the Silver Star for actions above and beyond the call of duty in combat.
I got just enough for your mother.
I think I'll stick around to see Odie cry like a little bitch.
That's all you gotta do.
He's a killer.
I grew up in a special forces family, and I actually went to Iraq in '09, mostly because I wanted to see where my dad went whenever he went away, right? And so I went over to Iraq and spent 7 months on the front line. My dad tried to get me to come home after 2 months, and I, in all of my 24 years of wisdom, decided to put my foot down and stay in a war zone, like, you know, and a little bit of a crazy person. That's okay. But long story short, I experienced a lot of what I think really triggers PTSD more than even battles. And that is this idea of sitting around knowing there are people hunting you, and knowing that at any moment your entire world can turn upside down, and knowing that you chose to be there. All of those elements creates a kind of, it creates like a superhuman thing while you're there. Like you put it aside and all of a sudden you're like a superhero. But when you come home, all of the things that were repressed because you couldn't think of that, you just had to think of the moment in front of you, it catches up. And so I had a number of my friends that I made when I was in Iraq come home, and it caught up to them. And quite frankly, it caught up to me too. I dealt with some serious PTSD when I came back from Iraq. I didn't, have a weapon. I didn't go to war, like in that sense, but my base got bombed a lot and I got shot at a couple times, and there were some really intense moments. And those were not even the part that gave me the PTSD. It was the everyday normal stuff, where I just kept feeling like somebody was coming after me and they weren't, like that, and I realized that that was the thing that people just don't talk about, because there's so much glory in like the bullshit. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss. Am I allowed to cuss on this?
Sorry?
Is my language okay on this, or should
yeah,
I use
oh,
that?
yeah.
Okay. Just making sure. I'm like, I have a sailor's mouth. Okay. I'm like,
Sorry, swearing is not a problem.
okay, thank you, Sophie. Just gotta check to make sure. But yeah, no, it was definitely something that I realized most of the soldiers that I knew, that was the part they couldn't talk about. It was like the real fear that is around you, and you learn to eat it and live it. And you can't just put that down. And you can tell a story of a firefight and understand why a soldier has PTSD. You can tell a story of, being on a caravan and getting blown up, and you understand. But when it comes to the real things that usually happen in war, the things that actually take the casualties, most people, there's no glory to it. There's no real story to it. You can't go home and like regale people with it. It's just horrible. And that's what war really is. Like, people don't realize it's not rushing up the side of the mountain for God and country. It's those moments. Yeah. And so to me, I thought that was a really important thing to touch on.
Well, it is actually, it is, and it's quite important, and then you did it beautifully. And if you read the comments that are under your film, you can tell that you've touched a lot of people with your film. A lot of soldiers, ex-soldiers, recognize themselves in your film.
Those comments were honestly the most important thing to me. That story, I didn't really make it for anybody but those people who had lived it. And so thank you for bringing those up, because to be honest, like, that's the part that, like, that's why I make movies, is for those people, the people that it actually matters to.
You don't know how much I believe in you, Bonnie.
Oh, thank you, Sophie. Oh, thank you.
Because of that, it's because you're putting into the light the problems that people tend to put under the carpet, and I really like that.
Thank you. Why else are we artists, right?
I would like to, because your shots are amazing. I mean, you wrote the script. That's beautiful. You can tell it's beautifully written, but then it was amazingly shot.
Thank you.
I loved everything. It's everything, even the editing. Did you everything? And
I was a little obsessive on it, I'm not gonna lie.
I was rewinding like, whoa.
Oh my God, that means so much. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you.
So tell me about it. I'd like to the film directing bit. How did it go? Where did you film?
Oh man, it's actually like such a great story. We didn't have a lot of money for it. I just really wanted it to come out soon. I had actually had a soldier approach me and tell me that he was going through a lot of really heavy stuff, and he didn't want to tell his story, but he wanted to tell a story. And I was like, So I fictionalized kind of my experience and his experience together. Because again, these are the kind of stories that, like, people don't want to tell, like the soldiers who lived it don't want to tell. And so we did it honestly like a wing and a prayer. Pretty much everybody on that set was a first timer. Now, I did weed through like 300 people. I'm very big on meeting people and kind of sussing them out. And so I even met with my PAs. I picked everybody myself, and a lot of them, like I said, were new to LA. I was like the first job for probably 10 of the people on there. And then my good friend Toby, who's also shot other stuff with me, he thought I was absolutely insane for going as detailed as I was. He's like, Bonné. And I mean, there was one shot where to this day I still am like, mahaha. But there was one shot that it was the explosion. And every time it happened, we had to completely wipe everybody down and blow all the sand off of them to reset it. And we were losing the light, but I saw the actor's hands flip up the table in the take. And I was like, no, we have to do it again. And Toby was so mad at me. He was like, no, where's the AD? Somebody tell her we have to move on. And I was like, guess what? We're doing it again. And it ended up being the one that went in. And I was like, ha! And he has never questioned one of my shots again. Oh, but he's the best. Toby is the best. And his name's Tobias DeMille. He's fantastic. And he's also very socially conscious with all of his films as well. It's actually how we kind of hooked up was we both had this whole conversation of like, why making small chat or why make small talk when you can actually say something that matters? Like, why make a film if it has no point or it just adds to the garbage in the world? Like, what's the point of it? Especially with how long it takes, and you know better than anyone how long and grueling those hours are when you're shooting. So
editing.
yes, re-editing, editing again.
Directing, just directing. Not the actors. The actors is not the issue. Directing. When the people that are just screenwriters, they don't know that, but you're waiting to shoot something, and then you have the sound engineer that is having a nervous breakdown because you can hear click click from somewhere. We don't know where the click click is from. We can't hear the click click.
Nope.
You can hear the click click. So then because you can hear the click click, no one does anything. So there is no shot. The actors can't do anything. You know, that kind of details.
Oh yes.
Drive anyone crazy. You know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, my favorite thing is always whenever the sound guy decides to ask everyone to hold for room tone right in the middle of like a really hyper scene. Like, I don't know if it's like in the sound guy rule book that like if there's great energy and things are going, that you have to make everyone stand silent for a full minute. I think it's in the handbook somewhere.
So that's the experience of directing, and that's why when you see your film, when people direct films and they see other films being done, and your short film is on a scale where you've got lots of actors, special effects, multi locations. Yes. And as a film director, you're like, respect. You know?
Thank you. We had a lot of really wonderful people come together to make that happen. I mean, that's the beauty of making a movie, right? That's the one thing I have to say I do miss writing, like writing a book. I miss that first morning at 5 a.m. when everybody's just like a little antsy because no one slept the night before and everybody's at the coffee cart, you know, chatting it up and like, ooh, we're about to do this thing. I miss that. That's the thing I miss.
Oh no, when it goes well, it's fantastic. It's magic.
Oh yeah, it's totally magic.
You talked about music early on, and you know, I love the music you put on your film. Sorry to speak about your film, but especially at the end credits, you put Anyone from Everlast. And Everlast, for people that don't know Everlast, is very good for singing depression, suffering, loss, pain, everything.
Absolutely.
So you chose Anyone. I don't know, you could have, because if you look at all his songs, and he's got many songs.
Oh yeah.
You could have picked up, I don't know, This Kind of Lonely or any other songs. Why Anyone? I'm just curious.
There is something about the anonymity that like every soldier has. So when you think of a soldier, you don't think of a person unless you are in love with the soldier, have a dad for a soldier, you know, you think of a uniform, right? And so Anyone to me just kind of echoed that idea of like, these are actually people. They're not just, you know, uniforms. They're not just camouflage, and they're not just statistics in a desert somewhere. Like these are real people. And I love that you love Everlast, because I love Everlast.
I do.
When I was in Iraq, that CD came out, actually. CD.
When you film, you go straight into the problem. You go straight into the elephant in the room. Same with your chapters in your book. Straight into the problem, and even a scene that seems normal, like having a coffee in a coffee house, bang, the problem appears. And what I like is it shows in your writing as well, where when you write, the style of your writing, there is no filters to it. It's raw writing. It goes straight in your heart and in your mind. I really love that. Would you mind talking about your new novel then to our audience?
Well, thank you so much. I'll say that like the thing that gets me in trouble in the real world is the thing people like about me as a writer, that I'm like, oh, all that bullshit, excuse you. Let's get right to the point here.
I love it. I mean, at least I suppose you can meet people that think like you, and then when you get older, this is the beauty of getting older. Then the people that don't agree with you, they just fade away, and you just get a tribe that think like you and like your style. So no, don't change, please don't
I
change.
love the word tribe. I love that you like conjured tribe, because that's exactly what it is, right? We find our tribe as we get older. And I can't agree with that more. I was talking about that earlier today with one of my best friends. We were just talking about how like COVID's kind of done that too, where it's just kind of, it's made everything a lot more difficult to get together. It's made a lot of things more difficult just to stay in touch. But it's also brought the people in your life closer. Like I personally care more. Like today I got to see my friend and I got to hold her son. And it's the first time I got to hold him. He was born during COVID. And it was amazing. Like obviously that's a big experience anyway, but like it was even more powerful and more important just because, here we are. Like it almost is like a reminder of how much we care about each other. So yeah, it's been such an interesting year, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, very, very much so. Yeah, it's been a very interesting year. What do you think about your views on that?
Well, I'm in America, so it's a really interesting year for us, okay? Like really interesting. And especially coming from the background that I come from, like, my personal view of what's happening here is I see my country getting taken over by a psycho. And so it's, been really terrifying to be. I feel a lot like we're in Cabaret or something, like I feel like we're like like it's crazy. But that being said, like, I mean, it was, it's been really hard. Like my family actually moved my grandfather into my parents' house because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to see him at the place that he was living. So, everybody's lives are really shifting, but like I said, I do feel like it's pulling us closer. And I do feel like it's almost like reawakening this idea of like, who are we actually? Because now we're making this decision, and not just in politics and not just in our own lives, but in everything, right?
Would you like to talk about your book?
I would love to talk about the book. Thank you. I'm like, right. I could talk to you all day. So we're going to have too much.
We can do this again. Bonné,
I would love that.
Don't worry. You always
All the time.
my show.
Anytime you want, my friend, I will be here. I would love that. I would love that. So yeah, so Whispers, it's so funny. So this year I was supposed to have 2 feature films that I was shooting. And the first one was supposed to start in April, at the end of April. Okay. And of course, we actually didn't even call it off until almost the last week of March, which was actually my birthday too. And I was like, oh, this sucks. Like, this is just the worst. But my other film was supposed to shoot in September. And so we thought in those days, okay, we'll just shift this film to next year and we'll, start working on this one now. So we started, kind of loose prepping, not real prepping, but loose prepping it. And started getting some good traction. Of course, then everything fell apart, right? And nobody knew when things were going to start back up. And it was, it was rough. But quite frankly, I felt like really lucky that like I was okay. Like I am okay. You know what I mean? I've been fortunate that like my friends who have been sick have recovered. And like some of them are still really dealing with some issues, but like they at least are still here, And so like all of that just kind of was like, okay, COVID, whatever. But then I started seeing like people that I've known for 15, 20 years fighting with each other about really crazy things. Things that like, you're a thinking person. Like, I know you. Why would you even think this is real? And then people denying like things that you could watch with your own eyes, like things that like were being said and done. And it really affected me. And I wanted to say something, but like I said, because of the fact that everything was shut down. I didn't know when I'd be able to say something, right? I mean, even if all the stars in the sky lined up beautifully, when were we going to be able to shoot it? So I have always been obsessed with books, to the point where I used to get in trouble in school, mostly because I'd hoard my lunch money and then buy all the books from the Scholastic, and then I'd read them during class. So I was that kid. I was fully that kid. But I never really thought about doing, like, writing a book, because I learned the screenplay format, and not just the screenplay format. I spent years really like honing it. I have had amazing mentors, from like Sage Stallone to Diane Burrows, who like really took me under their wing. And so that was, that's where I was comfortable. I know the screenplay format. I mean, I can break it and stitch it back together and nobody would know it was broken. You know what I mean? So the idea of changing mediums was a little scary, but I knew that if I wanted to say something, I had to say it now. And I'm a fairly quick writer. I thought I was faster than I was starting to write this book, let me tell you, because it took me 4.5 months to write 325 pages, which was like, what? Like, this is so long, you know what I mean? And just diligently too. And I did so much research on it, because what I wanted to do was find the thing that was splitting. Like, we were all here before. What split us? What was the thing that was dividing us? Not the bright and shiny stuff that like we all think it is, but what was the real thing that was dividing us? Because that was spreading faster than COVID. And that was the thing that was scaring me. And that was the thing that I knew I had to bring up. So I went on a huge deep dive, figured out what I found to be the culprit, and it chilled me to the bone. And so long story short, I was like, well, I've never been a big fan of documentaries, because I feel like people, not all people, but a lot of people use them to push their own agenda. So I prefer to tell people lies and like tell them their lies. These are all lies. This is all made up, and bury as much truth into that as I possibly can, because I find, like, at least myself, I am much more open to new concepts when they do not affect me directly and it's not an attack on me, right? So that was what I decided to do. As I was like, this is my plan. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write something that it doesn't matter what side of the fence you were on. You can see why you hate your neighbor now. The best compliment that I've had so far on it is one guy actually wrote on as a review on Amazon that he felt like he'd lost an argument that he didn't even know he was having, and he wanted to go and evaluate himself at that point. And I was like, wow. And as a director, to be frank with you, I do agree. Being a director is a lot. Like, it takes a lot. And you are, especially as a woman, you are, looked to give orders to people who are much older than me usually, and have been, and like people who are much more seasoned, and, and they look to you for their orders. And it was something that I realized, the reason that I'm a director, the reason that I'm a writer, is because I have a perspective. And my perspective is that, like, I believe wherever you're from, whatever country you're from, whatever your background is, whatever, we all have the same basic humanity. And we all have the same basic needs and the same basic judgment. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are people on different sides of the scale, but as a whole, we are all very similar. And I've lived all over the world, and I can tell you, all over the world, we are all similar. And so to me, not only just sharing my perspective as a woman, but also as somebody who, does spend a lot of time outside in other cultures, I feel like it's really important for us to find that, and to be able to share our perspective. And for so long, the perspective that we have been fed has been this one idea of a man. It's not even a man. It's a guy thinking that this is what he's supposed to be. And so it's almost like toxic masculinity in a lens, because he thinks this is the guy he thinks this is the guy you want him to be. He thinks that actor is going to be the guy you want to be like. And he spins this web that's like unhealthy just because it's the only viewpoint. Like, if it was with all the other ones, it would be fine. That's just one person's viewpoint, but we've been copying the same perspective. And even a lot of times when us ladies get a chance, or, you know, somebody else from a different cultural background gets a chance, a lot of times we curb our own perspective to fit into this idea of what is supposed to be. And quite frankly, during COVID, I just was like, no, I'm not going to curve anything. Like, I've reached that point, I think, as in my age too, where I've reached this point where I'm like, no, the whole reason I'm here is because I have this perspective. And if I'm not sharing it, I'm doing a disservice, not only to myself, but to everyone who's like me out there who hasn't got to see themselves in something yet. And so I think that is probably my favorite thing that you said too, is just that, like, that idea of like, we are all in pain. We are, like, life has pain. It also has joy. It also has all kinds of other things, but we hide that, the part that makes us the most real. And I think it's really important that at this, especially at this time, that we just let that go. Like, we can't have those masks on anymore. We can't afford it. We can't afford it anymore.
Bonnie, would you say that being a daughter of a father that worked in the army, would you say that it gave you the discipline and the strength to achieve your goals?
That's such a great question. I definitely think that my parents instilled a work ethic in me, but I will say that I think growing up in a world of conformity taught me to really appreciate the things that set us apart. And so instead of it being something that like made me rigid, it was something that made me always question. Like, I question everything. I question, and not because I don't trust somebody, but because I want to know the answer for myself, not because someone told me. And I think that is probably how being in like a military kid actually affected me more than anything else. Was I rejected conformity on a whole level that I don't know if I would have if I hadn't been forced to live in that world. And don't get me wrong, I love my military background. It's something I would never trade for anything, because it gave me so much opportunity. And I love soldiers, like people who actually, most of the military is made up of people who actually care. They want to help. And then, you know, there are, you know, bad people just like everywhere else, but most of the soldiers that I know, like, really care, and they care deeply.
And my last question is, what advice or piece of advice would you give to our viewers? It could be for screenwriters, film directors, novelists. What is the thing you've learned and you'd like to share with us?
I love that question so much, Sophie. Thank you for asking that. Right? I'm like, well, for everybody and all encompassing, you know, stay true to your perspective. You're the only person in the world who has it. And you're the only person in the world who sees the things that you see. And it's important. Everybody's perspective is important. And it's the easiest thing to lose, because the world tries so hard to take it away. And people try so hard to take it away, because when somebody is standing in their truth and living from their perspective, it's scary to people who have allowed the world to chip away at them. And so I would say, whatever you are, whoever you are, just be you, because it's the only person in the whole world who has that perspective, and it's gone when you are. So share it. Bye. Bye.